In the vast emptiness of space, a storm was brewing. The Zarkonian Empire, a powerful alien force, had been conquering worlds for centuries. They were like space locusts, moving from one solar system to another, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. Now their hungry eyes had turned towards Earth and its colonies. Admiral Sarah Thompson stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, Earth's biggest warship. Her face was grim as she looked at the holographic map showing the Zarkonian fleet's movement. The red dots representing enemy ships were getting closer to the blue dot of Earth with each passing day. "How long do we have?" she asked her second-in-command, Captain Lee. "At their current speed, 3 months at best," Lee replied, his voice heavy with worry. Sarah nodded, her mind racing. The United Earth Navy had fought hard over the last year, trying to slow down the Zarkonian advance. But it wasn't enough. Earth's ships were too few, too weak compared to the alien armada. Back on Earth, the Global Defense Council was in chaos. Representatives from every nation argued day and night, trying to find a solution. They had already evacuated as many people as they could to the underground cities, but it wouldn't be enough if the Zarkonians broke through. In New Beijing, Dr. Jamal Meek, Earth's leading xenobiologist, was studying captured Zarkonian technology. "Their ships are like living things," he explained to a room full of military leaders. "They can heal themselves, adapt to our weapons. It's why our attacks aren't working." The news wasn't any better from the front lines. Colonel Yuki Tanaka sent a message from Jupiter's orbit, where Earth's outer defense line was stationed. "We can't hold them much longer," her hologram reported, the sound of alarms blaring in the background. "They're new ships. They're like nothing we've seen before." Panic started to spread among the public. Despite the government's efforts to keep things calm, people knew something big was coming. In cities around the world, some rioted, others prayed, and many tried to find ways off-planet. At the lunar shipyards, engineers worked around the clock, trying to build more ships, better weapons. But deep down, everyone knew it wasn't enough. Earth needed a miracle. That miracle came from an unexpected place. Dr. Amelia Chen, a scientist known more for her wild ideas than practical inventions, burst into a high-level military meeting. Her hair was messy, her lab coat stained with coffee, but her eyes sparkled with excitement. "I have an idea," she shouted, waving a tablet. "A new kind of ship, something the Zarkonians won't expect." At first, the generals laughed. Chen's previous ideas had been too strange, too impractical. But as she explained her concept, the laughter died down. What she was proposing was crazy, but it just might work. Admiral Thompson was called in to review the idea. She studied Chen's designs with a mix of disbelief and hope. "This goes against everything we know about ship design," she muttered. "Exactly," Chen replied, grinning. "The Zarkonians won't know what hit them." As the deadline grew closer, Earth threw everything it had into Chen's project. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot they had left. 3 weeks before the expected Zarkonian arrival, a scout ship brought terrifying news. The alien fleet had somehow jumped ahead. They would reach Earth in just 7 days. The Global Defense Council made a desperate decision. They would evacuate as many people as possible to Mars, while Earth's remaining ships made a last stand. As chaos erupted around the world, Dr. Chen worked frantically to finish her design. "Just a little more time," she kept saying, her eyes red from lack of sleep. In space, Admiral Thompson prepared her fleet for what might be humanity's last battle. She looked at the Earth, beautiful and blue, wondering if she would ever see it again. The clock was ticking. Humanity's fate hung in the balance. And somewhere in a secret lab, a strange ship was taking form. A ship that might just change everything. Dr. Amelia Chen was not your typical scientist. With her wild, untamed hair often held back by pencils, mismatched socks, and a lab coat covered in doodles, she stood out in the sterile halls of the Global Defense Research Center. But it wasn't just her appearance that made her different. It was her mind. While other scientists focused on improving existing technology, Amelia's thoughts wandered to places no one else dared to go. She didn't just think outside the box. She didn't believe the box existed at all. On this particular day, as the world prepared for the Zarkonian invasion, Amelia sat in her cluttered office, surrounded by strange contraptions and scribbled notes. Her eyes were fixed on a holographic model floating above her desk. It didn't look like any spaceship anyone had ever seen before. "Eureka!" she shouted, jumping up so suddenly that she knocked over a stack of books. "That's it. That's the answer." Amelia rushed out of her office, nearly colliding with Dr. Marcus Hendricks, the head of the research center. "Whoa there, Chen," he said, steadying her. "What's got you so excited?" "I've done it, Marcus," Amelia exclaimed, her eyes shining. "I've designed a ship that can beat the Zarkonians." Marcus sighed. He had heard many of Amelia's brilliant ideas before. "Chen, we don't have time for your unconventional theories right now. We need practical solutions." But Amelia wouldn't be deterred. She grabbed Marcus's arm and dragged him back to her office. "Look," she said, pointing at the hologram. "It's not just a ship. It's a cosmic joke." Marcus stared at the design, his brow furrowed. The more he looked, the more confused he became. "Chen, this doesn't make any sense. It defies every principle of ship design we know." "Exactly." Amelia grinned. "The Zarkonians won't know what to make of it either." Despite his skepticism, Marcus couldn't deny that Amelia's enthusiasm was infectious. "Explain it to me," he said, taking the seat. For the next hour, Amelia talked nonstop, her hands waving wildly as she described her creation. She spoke of quantum entanglement, of bending the laws of physics, of turning weaknesses into strengths. As she talked, Marcus's expression changed from doubt to amazement. "Chen," he said slowly, "this is either pure genius or complete madness. Why can't it be both?" Amelia laughed. Word of Amelia's design spread quickly through the research center. Soon, a crowd had gathered outside her office, trying to catch a glimpse of the strange hologram. Some scoffed, calling it impossible. Others argued that impossible was exactly what they needed right now. As the day wore on, more and more experts were called in to evaluate Amelia's design. Physicists scratched their heads, engineers argued loudly, and military strategists tried to imagine how such a ship would actually fight. Through it all, Amelia stood firm, answering every question, defending every unconventional choice in her design. Her confidence never wavered, even in the face of harsh criticism. As night fell, Admiral Thompson herself arrived at the research center. The room fell silent as she studied the hologram, her face unreadable. "Dr. Chen," she said finally, "can you really build this?" Amelia nodded, her usual playful demeanor replaced by serious determination. "Give me the resources, and I'll give you a ship that will make the Zarkonians wish they'd never heard of Earth." Admiral Thompson was quiet for a long moment. The fate of humanity might well rest on this decision. Finally, she turned to Marcus. "Dr. Hendricks, as of this moment, Project Pandora's Box is your top priority. Give Dr. Chen whatever she needs." A cheer went up from the gathered crowd. Amelia's face broke into a wide grin. As people rushed to congratulate her, she turned back to the hologram of her strange ship. "Hold on, Earth," she whispered. "Help is on the way." Deep beneath the surface of Mars, in a secret shipyard carved into the red planet's rock, Project Pandora's Box roared to life. The cavernous space, once silent and empty, now buzzed with activity 24 hours a day. Engineers, welders, and scientists from every corner of Earth worked tirelessly, their faces a mix of determination and disbelief. At the center of it all stood Dr. Amelia Chen, her wild hair now constantly held back by a hard hat. She moved from station to station, checking progress, solving problems, and encouraging her team. Her energy seemed endless, fueled by a combination of coffee and sheer willpower. "No, no, no," she shouted, rushing over to a group of engineers. "The quantum flux capacitor goes there, not there. If you put it there, the whole ship will turn inside out when we activate it." The engineers looked at each other, baffled. One of them, a veteran shipbuilder named Mike, spoke up. "Dr. Chen, with all due respect, none of this makes any sense. How can we build something we don't understand?" Amelia's face softened. She put a hand on Mike's shoulder. "That's the beauty of it, Mike. We're not just building a ship. We're building a mystery. A riddle that even we don't know the answer to. And that's exactly why it will work against the Zarkonians." As days turned into weeks, the strange ship began to take shape. From the outside, it looked like a jumble of mismatched parts, as if someone had taken pieces from a dozen different ships and glued them together randomly. Some sections seemed to fade in and out of existence, while others glowed with an eerie light. Admiral Thompson visited regularly, each time more astonished than the last. "Dr. Chen," she said during one visit, "I've seen a lot of ships in my day. But this is something else entirely." Amelia beamed with pride. "Wait until you see it in action, Admiral. This ship will rewrite the rules of space warfare." But not everyone was as enthusiastic. Dr. Marcus Hendricks, overseeing the project, grew more worried with each passing day. "Chen," he confronted her one evening, "we're pouring all of Earth's remaining resources into this. If it doesn't work." "It will work," Amelia interrupted, her eyes blazing with confidence. "Trust me, Marcus. Trust the science." As the deadline approached, tensions in the shipyard rose. Every system on the ship defied conventional logic. The engine room looked more like a mad scientist's laboratory. The weapons, if you could call them that, seemed more likely to confuse than to harm. One day, during a crucial test of the ship's main drive, something went wrong. Alarms blared throughout the facility as strange energy readings spiked off the charts. Workers ran for safety, certain that the whole place was about to blow up. But Amelia ran towards the danger, a wild grin on her face. She dove into the heart of the ship, fingers flying over controls that no one else understood. For several heart-stopping minutes, it seemed like all might be lost. Then suddenly, the alarms fell silent. The strange energy readings stabilized. Amelia emerged, her hair singed and her face covered in soot, but triumphant. "It works," she shouted, pumping her fist in the air. "It really works." The tension in the shipyard broke, replaced by cheers and applause. Even the skeptics had to admit that Amelia had done the impossible. As the final days of construction approached, a name was chosen for the ship: the U.S. Pandora. It seemed fitting for a vessel that contained so many unknowns. On the eve of the ship's completion, Amelia stood alone in the control room, looking out at her creation. It was beautiful in its strangeness, a testament to human ingenuity and desperation. "Tomorrow," she whispered to herself, "we change everything." Little did she know just how right she was. The U.S. Pandora was about to unleash a new era in galactic warfare, one that would leave both humans and Zarkonians in awe. The day of reckoning had arrived. Earth's skies, once blue and peaceful, now churned with ominous clouds as the Zarkonian fleet entered the solar system. Their massive ships, sleek and menacing, cast long shadows over the planet's surface. In orbit, Admiral Sarah Thompson stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Defiant. Her face was a mask of determination as she addressed the combined Earth fleet. "This is the moment we've been preparing for," she said, her voice carrying to every ship. "Today, we fight not just for Earth, but for the future of humanity. And we have a secret weapon." As if on cue, a shimmering portal opened behind the Earth fleet. From it emerged the strangest sight anyone had ever seen in space combat: the U.S. Pandora. The ship defied description. Parts of it seemed to phase in and out of existence. Its hull was a patchwork of materials, some reflecting light, others absorbing it completely. Appendages that might have been weapons, sensors, or something entirely different jutted out at odd angles. A collective gasp went up from both the human fleet and the approaching Zarkonians. Even the alien invaders, with their advanced technology, had never seen anything like this before. Inside the Pandora, Dr. Amelia Chen sat at the main control console, her fingers dancing over holographic displays. Around her, a hand-picked crew of Earth's brightest minds worked furiously to keep the ship's bizarre systems functioning. All systems operational, Amelia reported to Admiral Thompson. Well, mostly operational. The quantum flux is a bit fluxier than I'd like, but that might actually be a good thing. Thompson nodded, trying to hide her uncertainty. Dr. Chen, are you sure this will work? Amelia grinned, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Absolutely not. That's what makes it so perfect. Before Thompson could respond, the Zarkonian fleet opened fire. Streams of energy weapons lit up space, heading straight for Earth's defenders. Evasive maneuvers, Thompson shouted. But the Pandora didn't move. Instead, as the energy beams approached, parts of the ship simply disappeared. The attacks passed harmlessly through empty space, only for the ship to reappear moments later. What in the world? Muttered Thompson, staring at her tactical display in disbelief. Amelia's voice came over the comm, filled with glee. Quantum displacement fields. They can't hit what isn't there. The Zarkonian fleet seemed to hesitate, clearly thrown off by this unexpected development. Their next volley was more cautious, probing for weaknesses. Our turn, said Amelia. She pressed a series of buttons on her console. The Pandora's strange appendages began to glow. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, suddenly, 3 Zarkonian ships simply vanished, reappearing seconds later in completely different positions, colliding with their own fleet. Chaos erupted among the alien forces. Their well-organized formation broke apart as ships tried to avoid their teleporting comrades. How? How did you do that? Thompson asked, awe in her voice. Localized space-time distortion. Amelia replied casually, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. We're not destroying their ships. We're just rearranging them a bit. As the battle raged on, the Pandora continued to defy all laws of physics and warfare. It phased through solid objects, redirected enemy fire back at the Zarkonians, and at one point seemed to be in 3 places at once. The alien fleet, for the first time in its long history of conquest, was completely baffled. Their sophisticated targeting systems couldn't lock onto the Pandora. Their shields were useless against weapons that ignored physical space. Their tactics, honed over centuries of warfare, crumbled in the face of this impossible ship. On Earth, in underground bunkers and hidden cities, humans watched the battle unfold on their screens. Confusion gave way to hope, and then to jubilation, as they realized the tide was turning. Admiral Thompson allowed herself a small smile. Dr. Chen, she said, I think it's time we show the Zarkonians that humanity is not to be underestimated. Push them back. Amelia's response was enthusiastic. With pleasure, Admiral. Let's give them a show they'll never forget. As the Pandora prepared for its next impossible maneuver, one thing became clear to both humans and Zarkonians alike. The rules of galactic warfare had just been rewritten. The space around Earth had become a cosmic circus, with the U.S. Pandora as the ringmaster. Dr. Amelia Chen, her fingers flying over the ship's bizarre controls, orchestrated a symphony of chaos that left the Zarkonian fleet reeling. Let's try the quantum entanglement torpedoes, Amelia shouted, her eyes gleaming with manic excitement. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Rodriguez, looked at her with a mix of awe and fear. The what now? Just push the big purple button, Amelia replied, grinning. Rodriguez did as he was told. The Pandora shuddered, and suddenly, glowing orbs of energy shot out from its hull. They moved slowly at first, easy targets for the Zarkonian ship's point defense systems. But as soon as the aliens fired upon them, the orbs split into dozens of smaller particles, each one entangled with the others. The Zarkonian ships found themselves wrapped in a web of quantum energy. Whenever they hit one particle, its entangled partners reacted instantly, creating a cascade of unpredictable effects. Some ships spun out of control, others found their weapon systems scrambled, and a few simply blinked out of existence for several seconds before reappearing. On the bridge of the Zarkonian flagship, Supreme Commander Zixtal was losing his composure. His three eyes blinked rapidly in distress as he barked orders to his crew. "Target that abomination," he screeched, pointing a tentacle at the Pandora. "Use the gravity lance." A massive Zarkonian battleship moved into position, its front splitting open to reveal a weapon that could crush planets. It fired, sending a concentrated beam of gravitational force towards the Pandora. Amelia saw it coming and grinned. "Perfect. Activate the gravity inversion field." As the beam struck the Pandora, something impossible happened. Instead of being crushed, the ship seemed to absorb the gravitational energy. For a moment, it glowed brightly, then released the energy back towards the Zarkonian fleet. But now, instead of crushing force, it was repulsive force. Zarkonian ships were flung away like leaves in a hurricane. They collided with each other, their formation completely shattered. "How?" Zixtal screamed, his tentacles flailing. "How can they do this? It defies all laws of physics." Back on the Pandora, Amelia was in her element. The laws of physics are more like guidelines. "Really?" she muttered to herself as she initiated the next impossible maneuver. The Pandora began to spin, faster and faster until it was just a blur. Suddenly, it split into 5 identical copies, each one engaging a different part of the Zarkonian fleet. "Are those holograms?" Admiral Thompson asked from her command ship, watching in disbelief. "Not exactly." Amelia's voice crackled over the comm. "We're using quantum superposition. The ship is literally in 5 places at once. Don't ask me how we're keeping the crew from being in 5 places at once. I'm still working on that part." The Zarkonian fleet was in complete disarray. Their sophisticated battle computers, programmed with millennia of combat data, were useless against the Pandora's impossible tactics. Ships fired at empty space where the Pandora had been seconds ago, or found their weapons mysteriously transformed into harmless light shows. In a desperate move, a group of Zarkonian cruisers attempted to ram the Pandora. As they approached, Amelia's eyes lit up. "Oh, they shouldn't have done that," she said, her fingers dancing over the controls. "Initiate the phase shift." Just as the Zarkonian ships were about to make contact, the Pandora shifted partially out of phase with normal spacetime. The alien cruisers passed right through it, their hulls intersecting with the Pandora's internal spaces. When the Pandora shifted back, the Zarkonian ships found themselves hopelessly entangled, parts of their ships fused with the Pandora and each other. As the battle raged on, it became clear that the Zarkonians were fighting an enemy they couldn't understand, let alone defeat. Their once invincible armada was being taken apart by a single ship that seemed to regard the laws of physics as mere suggestions. Supreme Commander Zixtal stared out at the battle, his confidence shattered. For the first time in his long career of conquest, he felt something alien to his species: doubt. The tide of the battle had turned, and with it, perhaps the fate of the galaxy itself. As the battle raged on, the true brilliance of Dr. Amelia Chen's design began to shine. The U.S. Pandora wasn't just a weapon. It was a constantly evolving puzzle that the Zarkonians couldn't solve. "Time to show them our party trick," Amelia announced, her eyes glowing with excitement. She pressed a series of buttons that seemed to be randomly placed across her console. Suddenly, the Pandora began to change shape. Its hull stretched and twisted, forming impossible geometries. One moment it was spherical. The next it had become a twisting Mobius strip of metal and energy. Lieutenant Rodriguez gripped his seat, looking slightly green. "Dr. Chen, is the ship supposed to be doing this?" Amelia laughed. "Of course. We're reconfiguring our quantum structure to match the harmonic resonance of the Zarkonian shields. In simple terms, we're becoming the key to their lock." As the Pandora approached the nearest Zarkonian battleship, it phased right through the alien vessel's shields as if they weren't there. The Zarkonians, panicked by this impossible maneuver, began firing wildly, their shots passing harmlessly through the Pandora's ever-changing form. On the Zarkonian flagship, Supreme Commander Zixtal was losing control of his troops. "Hold formation," he screeched into the comm. "It's just one ship. How can one ship do this?" But it wasn't just one ship anymore. As the Pandora danced between the Zarkonian vessels, it left behind smaller versions of itself. These mini Pandoras zipped around, causing even more chaos. They weren't firing weapons, but instead were changing the fundamental properties of space around them. Zarkonian ships found themselves stuck in bubbles of altered time, experiencing minutes while seconds passed outside. Others were caught in loops of curved space, chasing their own tails in endless circles. Admiral Thompson watched from her command ship, a mix of awe and confusion on her face. "Dr. Chen," she called over the comm, "what exactly is happening out there?" Amelia's voice came back, breathless with excitement. "We're rewriting the local laws of physics, Admiral. The Zarkonians can't fight us because we're changing the rules of the game faster than they can adapt." As if to prove her point, the Pandora suddenly split into 2, then 4, then 8 copies of itself. But these weren't illusions or holograms. Somehow, the ship had created quantum duplicates of itself, each one fully real and capable of independent action. The Zarkonian fleet, already in disarray, was thrown into complete chaos. Their sophisticated targeting systems couldn't keep up with the multitude of Pandoras, each one behaving according to its own set of physical laws. In a desperate attempt to regain control, Supreme Commander Zixtal ordered his flagship to engage the Pandora directly. The massive Zarkonian vessel, bristling with weapons, bore down on what Zixtal thought was the real Pandora. Amelia saw the flagship approaching and grinned. "Perfect. They're falling right into our trap. Initiate the reality inversion." As the Zarkonian flagship fired its main weapon, a beam of pure annihilation energy, the Pandora seemed to fold in on itself. The beam hit, and for a moment, it looked like the strange human ship had finally been destroyed. But then, reality itself seemed to hiccup. The destruction of the Pandora reversed, the energy beam was absorbed, and suddenly, it was the Zarkonian flagship that was folding in on itself, caught in the backlash of its own weapon. Zixtal watched in horror as his mighty ship began to shrink, crushed by forces he couldn't comprehend. In the last moments before the flagship imploded, he finally understood the truth. The humans hadn't just built a better ship, they'd changed the nature of space combat itself. As the Zarkonian flagship vanished in a pinpoint of light, a cheer went up from the human fleet. The remaining Zarkonian ships, witnessing the loss of their leader and faced with an enemy they couldn't hope to understand, began to retreat. Admiral Thompson's voice, filled with emotion, came over the general comm. "Dr. Chen, you've done it. You've saved Earth." Amelia leaned back in her chair, a tired but satisfied smile on her face. "No, Admiral," she replied. "We've done more than that. We've shown the galaxy that humanity is a force to be reckoned with, and we're just getting started." As the Pandora's quantum duplicates began to remerge with the original, one thing was clear. The age of conventional space warfare was over. A new era had begun, and humanity was leading the charge. The days following the Battle of Earth were filled with a mix of jubilation and disbelief. As news of the victory spread across the planet and its colonies, humans everywhere celebrated their unexpected triumph over the seemingly invincible Zarkonian Empire. In New York City, holographic displays in Times Square replayed the battle, showing the U.S. Pandora's impossible maneuvers. Crowds cheered every time the strange ship phased through an enemy vessel or split into multiple copies of itself. Street vendors were already selling Pandora's box toys that changed shape when you squeezed them. On Mars, the engineers and scientists who had worked tirelessly on Project Pandora's box were hailed as heroes. They walked through the streets of the domed cities, receiving handshakes, hugs, and free drinks from grateful colonists. But the true star of the hour was Dr. Amelia Chen. As she stepped off the shuttle that brought her back to Earth, she was mobbed by reporters and well-wishers. Camera drones buzzed around her head as she made her way to the hastily arranged press conference. "Dr. Chen, Dr. Chen," shouted a reporter from the front row. "How does it feel to have saved humanity?" Amelia, her wild hair even more disheveled than usual, grinned broadly. "It feels pretty good," she admitted. "But I didn't do it alone. This was a team effort, from the engineers who built the Pandora to the brave crew who flew her into battle." Another reporter raised her hand. "Can you explain in simple terms how the Pandora works?" Amelia's eyes twinkled mischievously. "Well, imagine you're playing a board game, but every time it's your turn, you can change one of the rules. That's basically what the Pandora does, but with the laws of physics." The press conference continued for hours, with Amelia patiently answering questions and occasionally drifting off into complex scientific explanations that left the reporters scratching their heads. Meanwhile, in the halls of power, the implications of the Pandora's technology were being hotly debated. The United Earth government was flooded with requests from various nations and corporations, all wanting a piece of the new technology. Admiral Thompson found herself in endless meetings with world leaders and military strategists. "The Pandora has changed everything," she explained to a room full of generals. "We need to completely rethink our approach to space defense." But it wasn't just Earth that was feeling the effects of the battle. Across the galaxy, news of the Zarkonian defeat spread like wildfire. Species that had lived in fear of the Empire for centuries suddenly saw a glimmer of hope. On distant worlds, resistance movements sprang up overnight. Alien civilizations that had been hesitant to stand against the Zarkonians now reached out to Earth, seeking alliances and trade agreements. The Zarkonians themselves were in disarray. With their supreme commander gone, and their fleet in tatters, the once mighty empire began to crumble. Internal power struggles and rebellions in conquered territories threatened to tear the empire apart. Back on Earth, Dr. Chen found herself thrust into the spotlight. She was invited to give lectures at prestigious universities, appear on talk shows, and even had a line of action figures made in her likeness, which, to her amusement, had kung fu grip and reality-warping action. But Amelia wasn't content to rest on her laurels. In her lab, she was already working on improvements to the Pandora systems. "The ship we sent into battle was just a prototype," she explained to her team. "Imagine what we can do with a whole fleet of improved Pandoras." As humanity looked to the stars with new confidence, the U.S. Pandora became more than just a ship. It became a symbol of human ingenuity and the power of thinking outside the box, or in this case, thinking outside the very laws of physics. In classrooms across Earth and its colonies, children learned about the battle that changed the course of human history. They marveled at holographic recreations of the Pandora's impossible maneuvers and dreamed of one day piloting ships that could bend reality itself. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, seeing them as just another primitive species to be conquered. But in unleashing the strangest warship ever seen, humanity had not only defended itself, but had also announced its arrival on the galactic stage in spectacular fashion. As Dr. Amelia Chen looked up at the stars one night, a smile played on her lips. "Look out, universe," she whispered. "We're just getting started." The age of humanity had begun, and it promised to be stranger and more wonderful than anyone could have imagined.